Welcome to the session on melody. We touched upon the aspects of scales and raga which form the basis of melody. However, the construction and form of the melody is a different subject by itself. Melody has always been the core of music, all the more in Indian film music. We will start with the structure of melody, then move on to a controversial topic of creating melodies. There is a view that melody needs to just happen and cannot be created. We have a different view that we will discuss. Then we will look at how melody is created in the Western world and in the Indian classical world. We will then explore how it has been applied in the Indian film music context. We have all been used to melodies from our childhood. There are some aspects in the music that we have subconsciously appreciated over time. We probably did not attach a specific dimension to that. Let us take a look at some of the key dimensions. Music needs to have a simple hook, or what we call as a motif. Motif is the catchy part that we hum all the time. There are some portions which need to be disciplined and some where it needs to throw in a surprise. Any melody, we need to have a conflict and a resolution. There is a human tendency to expect resolution if the melody is in a state of suspense or conflict. It needs to have a form. We discussed that earlier. Form gives the structure. Melody also needs to repeat itself. We expect repetition, and only when something repeats, it sticks to us. It needs to be unique. However, many of the melodies sound similar to earlier melodies. It happens in the classical world as well. However, as long as it is an inspired version, it is fine. Now let us get into the aspect of creation. This is a subject of massive debate. The idea that is presented is that there is a method to the madness. It is, after all, not a very unstructured process. The core idea is the motif. This can be triggered by various means. It could be a chord progression, a bass line, a unique rhythm beat, the phrase of a raga, etc. Once we have the motif and settle down on a specific form, it is a question of varying the motif and building on it. Coming back to the point on inspiration, taking a motif from a different song and varying it is an accepted practice. In fact, many of the songs we hear are actually inspired. We will now look at how melodies are constructed in Western music. It is built on the concept of motif, phrase, and period. The motif itself can be varied, and there are many techniques. We will look at it in the next slide. We then employ the aspects of rhythm, harmony, and counterpoint. They are stitched together in an overall form. As we discussed earlier, bringing in the aspects around symmetry and balance into the structure to show the variations. Generally, chords are built based on the melody. We can also do it the other way, chords driving the melody. What we see here are illustrations of two main concepts, the structure and the motif variations. On the left side, you see how the bars are grouped together into phrases and phrases getting regrouped into periods. A couple of periods make up a verse. The phrase in the Indian classical music is a shorter melodic concept which would generally fit within a bar. On the right side, we see the illustration of how a motif can be varied. These are some of the common techniques. In expansion, you would see how a motif is expanded with an addition of an additional bar. Truncation is the opposite, where the motif is truncated. In repetition, the motif is repeated exactly with no change in the notes. In sequence, the motif is repeated with a shift in pitch. In the retrograde technique, the melodic aspect is repeated backwards. In thinning, the melody is simplified with minimum notes. In octave transfer, the motif is repeated an octave higher. In Indian classical music, we would say a sthai higher. We would have seen these techniques almost in every song, probably a couple used in each song. The melody needs to be aligned with the other three elements. Melody is generally aligned with rhythm, begins on the strong beat of the rhythm. However, we bring in variations like back phrasing and front phrasing. Back phrasing is when we begin a song after the commencement of the beat, and front phrasing is where we start the music before the commencement of the beat. The similar concept exists in Indian classic music as well. The interaction of chords and raga is a different topic that we will take up separately. Some of the chords are so unique to raga. For example, the minor sixth is so well connected to Sivaranjani that it becomes the core of the song. Numerous songs from R.D. Burman and Ilayaraja illustrate this concept. Melody needs to be aligned to bring in the cadences, which create the conflict and resolution. Many a time, the melody is derived from the underlying chords. The tricky part comes in when we build a song on a raga and we use the counterpoint. We might have to introduce some accidental to facilitate the counterpoint. We will now move on to the Indian classical side. Melody in Indian classical music is also based on a similar concept of phrases. However, the length of a phrase is shorter as compared to Western music, and it is mainly to show the essence of the raga. Phrases are called by different names in Carnatic and Hindustani music. It is referred to as a pidi in Carnatic and pakad in Hindustani music. It means to catch. Basically, with these short phrases, we will be able to catch or identify a raga. We have a clearly defined set of these phrases for each raga. In addition to these phrases, we have a very clearly laid out set of rules on which notes to commence a song, which notes do I use to rest, which notes do I use to end a song, which notes for which we need to apply specific ornamentations or what we call as gamakas, and which ornamentation to use for a specific note. We have rules to this level of granularity. There is the part in Indian classical music where the performer is able to show his or her mastery on the creative side. This is called manodharma. This must not contain any lyrics. Even this portion is actually planned and structured using the techniques mentioned. It might look spontaneous, but is actually a carefully planned exercise. The diagram here shows a deeper view into the phrases. We could look at this across the 4 dimensions. These indicate the rules, or what we can call as guidelines. It guides us on the notes to commence and end, the type of gamagam to use, which phrase to leverage in a raga, and what raga to use when. This cannot get any more simpler. Film music composers have approached melody very differently. While the earlier composers used the form structure and leveraged the pidi pakad in developing the melodies, the later composers shifted to a Western approach of varying the motif. Well, we could use both the approaches and blend it. This gives us a large number of options to play with and come up with many more melodies. This brings us to the end of this session on melody. We have looked at melody from the 3 schools of music. This is a large concept by itself. As we discussed, there are parallels and differences as well. I would suggest that you look at your favorite songs from these dimensions we discussed, and you would start to explore more. Thanks for watching, and as always, please do send in your comments and subscribe to this channel.